Another day, make a stick. Welcome back. We check Anki to start. What flashcards we got due? What flashcards we got due? None. All right. So then, what did we learn yesterday? I think I actually got it today. It would be about improving complex mastery for medical students. Would have been the section we were studying. And I think we would have read about this guy named Larson, who was a medical teacher, a researcher for medical teaching, medical training. He was a doctor, or is a doctor, and he basically found three things in his research and experience in teaching medical students. And the first important thing was that for complex skills, especially verbal skills, like actual doing things, such as diagnosing patients, that skill, students actually perform better at the skill, develop the skill better when they actually practice the skill more than just reading about it. So if you basically had students that just read, or they read more about performing the skill, and one group that practiced the skill more, the group that actually practiced the real thing will perform better than the group that read about it. However, on a written exam, such as a written final or like a multiple choice or whatever, fill in the blank, essay, whatever kind of written exam it is, they'll basically perform the same. So you can get this thing where you're like, you think based on the written exams, these traditional exams, that, oh, these guys are ready to go, and then they don't actually know how to practice or perform the skill very well. Because there's a difference between knowing the theory behind it, being able to explain it, articulate it, conceptually understand it, versus actually being able to do something. Now they complement each other, but essentially the closer you can actually practice the real thing, the better you'll become at it. And this is why we see so many simulators being developed for performing complex skills, such as flight simulators, or they said something like towboat simulators. They got practice clinics to diagnose fake, like simulated patients, etc. That was the first lesson. So the closer you can actually do to practice the real thing, the better you're going to perform at that real thing and learn that real thing. Number two, what would this have been? Number three would have been the importance of not feedback, not delayed practice, not delayed feedback, not spaced repetition, it's not interleaved practice, not very practice. The importance of, the importance of something. What could number two have been about? Three would have been the importance of learning from experience, especially medicine and being a doctor is a lot about learning on the job, learning by experience. And so you only spend 2 years in medical school actually in the classroom, and then you get into clinical settings. So the importance of learning through experience. But that begs the question of what type of experience actually leads to learning, because we have plenty of experience. Some experience leads to improvement in learning. Some experience doesn't seem to improve or lead to any learning. Okay? What was two then? Would this have been like interleaved in varied practice? No. Here we go. This would have been about basically overemphasis on variation can actually detract from focus and mastering the basics. Meaning, in the example given in the medical scenario, it was like, well, if there's 100 different symptoms that can manifest for a certain disease, do you really want to train medical students on all 100 equally, all the different 100 symptoms equally? Or should we train them mostly, or is this going to detract from, like, if 90% of the symptoms are the same every time for this disease, is it really a good decision or strategy to, practice all the different 100 symptoms, or should we just focus mainly on the core symptoms and the basics and the fundamentals, the most common things? Well, I guess the book argues that, and Larson himself argues that, like, you should focus more on the fundamentals, the basics, the things that happen most often, and then, vary a little bit, but don't spend like equal time and effort learning all the different potential symptoms when there's one that manifests the most. Okay. I think that's this is just my own thought, is that, like, I like that reasoning. That's strategic, but also at the same time, maybe getting a good variation of an understanding of all the different symptoms can actually lead to building an intuition of what this disease really is, how it works, how it manifests, so that you don't need to know exact details. You can be like, yeah, that sounds like this, or that, based on what you're telling me, this appears to be what's going on with your body, etc. Maybe not. Anyway, I think that's basically where we were. Those three lessons that he's learned. Go ahead and check though. Actual skill better, practice skill, reading about compared to reading about it isn't enough. Written exam, reading and practice skill perform equally. We are seeing more and more simulators for training complex skills. Overemphasis on variety can sometimes detract from the basics. Importance of learning from experience. Interesting. They don't all go in on variation. They do focus on some repetition. Okay. That was an old note from mine. All right, I think I got the basics from yesterday. Let's continue reading, and I'll retrieve in a second. So, back in a sec. All right, guys. There we go. Just completed this section on improving complex skills for medical students. Basically, we answered the question of, what makes experience, what is a way to learn from experience? What experience do we learn from? What experience do we don't learn from? Reflection. So whether we do it on purpose or accidentally, consciously or subconsciously, reflection is what leads to learning from experience. Okay? That's when you process it. That's when you connect it. That's when you actively work with it. Experience itself is largely passive, or a lot of it can be. Okay? Then we can talk about these conferences that residency medical students experience, where they basically have an in-service, all for hours of the day. They get a lunch. They basically just listen to lectures. They leave. They forget. So, is this a waste of time? Larson basically says that, what are we getting from the end? Because from it in the end, this is required for curriculum. For medical residencies, it's required by the curriculum. You're required to show up. You're required to hear the, lectures from the representatives or the faculty, whatever. And that's it. And Larson's like, well, this is really not supported by learning science. We should be pushing for mandatory quizzing, testing, and maybe even interleaved testing as well. Spaced learning. So you get a quiz at the end of the day on the conference, and then, a couple times in your email box over the next couple of weeks or months, you'll get some review questions that you have to answer, which I think is really smart, really great thinking, future thinking, future forward thinking. So now we're into the second to last section in chapter 3, Mix Up Your Practice, which is these principles are broadly applicable. It's actually quite a short section. So I've got quite a lot of time. I'm going to go ahead and read a couple pages, or at least a couple paragraphs, and then I'll be back to reflect. All right, guys. So this section, these principles are broadly applicable. So I've read about half or about 2/3 of this section. And so this section is all about Coach Dooley is his name. He was Georgia's head coach for their college football team for a couple decades, like the 60s to the 80s. Won a national championship, won 6 conference championships, won like 200 games, lost like 70. Very successful coach. And so they were like, the author's like, well, thinking about athletics, this may not be the first thing comes to mind when you're talking about learning science, learning strategies, and this kind of stuff, but it is. And so they're talking about dual lead strategy and how it aligns with, these principles that we've been studying: interleave practice, varied practice, spaced repetitions. And so, dual lead strategy around college football, is that there's a new game every week, right? You're preparing for that new game. You got a new opposition, which means you need to strategize. You need to learn their playbook or their plays. You need to learn plays that you're going to use to counter. So there's a lot of new things to learn each week, your matchups and everything. But on top of this, you got to stay sharp on your fundamentals, keep practicing the basics: catching, throwing, running, this and that. And beyond just the new opposition every week, the fundamentals, you've also got to each player to memorize their playbook, or the playbook, and as well as the special plays, like the trick plays, essentially. So there's lots to learn, and successful athletic teams, they are using plenty of spaced repetitions. They're using tons of varied and interleave practice. They're speeding it up. They're slowing the plays down. They're running them in real time. They're starting with individual players, what they're doing, and then they're stitching it together with the whole team, and then they're stitching it together the whole play live. I think that's basically everything I read about. Yeah, that's all I had for that. I guess I'll read one more paragraph. We got about a minute left. I might just actually leave it there for now. We'll be back tomorrow to read more. We're now on page 62 with only 5 more pages in chapter 3. So we're actually nearly finished with chapter 3, which is crazy to me. Because it felt like it took so long to get through chapter 1, but the last chapter in this book's nuts, 50 pages, so yeah, I think we're starting to move faster, which may or may not be a good thing. But that's it for today. We'll keep moving through chapter 3 tomorrow. Mix up your practice, and yeah, talk to you later. See ya.